Hello, we're going to do chapter 2. Let me get started. All right, so we're going to go through our chapter 2 notes. I don't think it'll take quite as long as chapter 1, even though they're longer. There's not as many blanks to fill in, and it's still pretty much just overview information, and that's why I lump chapter 1 and 2 together, because honestly, the information mainly overlaps. So let's go find the notes. Here we go. And so basically, we're still just talking about the different categories of funds and the different categories of governmental activities. So as we look through here, I think you're going to see basically the same information. We're going to unpack the CAFR some more and things like that. So governmental activities, business type, and then fiduciary is talking about governmental activities is going to be, oh, there's storms entering the area near Friends University and home. Important information. Okay, so governmental activities are the ones that are basically benefiting the whole group of people, like the whole town, the whole city. So ones that protect life or property, like police and fire stations, streets, highways, bridges, parks, cultural and social services, general admin support, that kind of stuff. Business type activities are going to be like little businesses that operate within the city. And so the main one I gave as an example last time was the water department. And so, and that would make sense. And so, but in addition to that, we might have like parking garages where people pay to park in that specific lot, or a public golf course or public swimming pools. So, and then fiduciary activities are going to be the ones that are like investments that are earning money and things like that. So there's the primary government and then component units. And so the primary government would be the main whole government, right? So a state government would be considered a primary government, or a city or a township or whatever. Then there's some special purpose governments that would be separate bodies that would operate under the government. And so I can't think of a good example of that right now, but we'll come across one later. A component unit is one that has separate elected officials underneath. And so that might be pieces or parts of like a public school system and that kind of thing. So as far as the financial statements go, like we talked about last time, there's the government-wide financials and the fund financials. The government-wide financials are basically the balance sheet and the income statement. And then for the fund, so there are the governmental funds have 2, proprietary have 3, and fiduciary have 2. We learned that last time. So the 2 here are an income statement and balance sheet. On the income statement, it's called a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And so it basically has an equity statement attached to it. And then a statement of net assets, which is the balance sheet. And then the 3 proprietary ones are the same ones we have in financial accounting. The reason why there's 3 instead of 4 is because they take the income statement and changes in equity and add it and put it together as one. And so basically proprietary funds have all the same financials as financial accounting businesses, and then 2 fiduciary. And so, and it's basically a balance sheet and one of changes in equity. And there's not really a lot of net income that happens in fiduciary funds. Okay, so we have to determine if a fund is major. So a fund is individual parts under the whole umbrella. And we have to determine if it gets its own column in the government-wide financials or not. And that's why we do this calculation. And so this will be the only calculation we get to do in this chapter. So I'm actually kind of excited to do it. But I don't really practice it much because really I just explain it here. But like when we get to do the homework, I'll get to actually do some math with you. So as far as this goes, so for each major fund, it's like a separate column on the fund financials. And if it's non-major, it's just listed as other. And so all of the non-major funds go in the other, like on the non-major components go in the other column, as opposed to having their own separate columns. So to determine if a fund is major, you look at their total assets, liabilities, revenues, or expenditures. And if any one of those is at least 10% of total assets, liabilities, or whatever, then all funds of that category will be reported as major. So what we do is we take the assets of the fund and compare it to total assets of the whole government. And so if we look at assets of the fund and it's at least 10% or more, then we will report it as a major fund. So out of all the funds of that category. So if we're looking at governmental funds, so governmental funds would be like the public safety, public works type stuff. And if we look at one fund and we compare it to all governmental funds, if it's 10% or more of all governmental funds, then it's a major fund. So we would look at assets to total assets, liabilities to total liabilities, revenue to total revenue, and expenditures to total expenditures. And if it's over 10% on any one of those, then it's considered a major fund. But you also have to look at this. So it has to be this and this, okay? So then we also look and see if total assets are at least 5% of all governmental and enterprise funds combined. I'm just going to pop over and show you the example of the homework because I think that'll help us to be able to do this. So if we look at the homework for this particular chapter, sorry. All right, so this is the example that we'll do. It's for the homework for this chapter, there's 4 tabs. Don't worry, they're all pretty quick. But the problem here, so what you're going to do, and I'll go ahead and just do one for you. This is looking to see if the gas tax revenue fund is considered major, or if the housing and urban development grant is considered major, or if the library is considered major. So what you do is you take the assets of the gas tax revenue fund, and we see it needs to be more than 10% of all governmental funds, and needs to be both in any one of the rows. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, we'll take that number divided by all governmental funds, and it's more. Oh, that's good. Okay, but it also has to be more here. Needs to be both, but can be any of the rows. So if any one of the rows does it, then that's fine. So here divided by here. Oh, nope. Okay, so it didn't meet the category there, but you have to check each of them. So then we would do liabilities divided by here. And that you don't even have to do this one over here, but we'll go ahead and do it anyway. Boom, 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 boom. And then total revenue divided by all revenue, and gas tax revenue divided by all here. Oh, nope, nope. Expenditures divided by all governmental. Nope. All right. So when we look at those numbers, we did get over 10% right here, but we never got over 5%. And if we look, it says a fund is major if any one is at least 10 and one is at least 5. And since none of them got over 5, then that means that that is not a major fund. So anyway, just a fun little calculation to do. And so I set up the table for you. This information is from problem 220 of the book, but I went ahead and put in the given for you. So, okay, next. So one thing to keep in mind, the general fund will always be considered a major fund. The general fund, we haven't really talked about it yet, but you're going to talk a lot about it. That's what chapter 4 will be, the whole chapter 4. But the general fund is where most things run through. So the police department, fire department, all that kind of stuff. And it will always be considered major. It would be considered major numerically anyway, because a lot happens in the general fund, but you don't have to run the numbers. So. And we only do this major fund situation for governmental funds and enterprise funds. And so we don't have to do it for internal service and fiduciary funds. All right, so definition of a fund. We did that last time we were here. Basically, it's a fund. It's a little entity with its own separate set of books and statements. So it'll have its own chart of accounts, its own journal entries and posting to ledgers and financial statements and everything. So a fund is like a little business within the government, but there will be a general fund and there will be like a water department and the library, and all of those are going to be individual funds within the umbrella of the government. So let's go ahead and identify our funds. And so there are 5 governmental funds, and we're going to talk about those in chapters 3 through 6. And then chapter 7 covers proprietary, and chapter 8 covers fiduciary. So the first governmental fund is the general fund. So there, we'll talk about the general fund down here. See, there's all of them. Okay. So the next one will be special revenue funds. Okay, so a special revenue fund, I'll just talk about all of them down below. Special revenue fund, let's see, a capital projects fund. And there could be more than one of these. And so like here, there could be one or more than one. You can have multiple capital projects going on at the same time, like fixing Kellogg could be like a capital projects fund that's been going on for like 20 years. And so debt service fund, have more than one of those, and then a permanent fund. That's one that like if money is going to stay in something and do something special, I don't really know. So that's an example of a permanent fund, right? So then proprietary, it can be internal service, and that means that they're providing a business-like service just inside of the government. So an example might be my dad's friend Pete runs the shop of the city. So he runs the mechanic shop of the city of Concordia. So it's kind of like a business within the city because he maintains like all the police cars and all the fire trucks and all that kind of stuff. All the mowers for the mowing of the public cemeteries. Public cemeteries would be another example of something governmental, right? And so then as far as that goes, like he's considered an internal service fund because he doesn't service anybody except for the government. So he only like fixes cars for the city. So he's considered like a business within. So it's called an internal service fund. An enterprise fund is external. That's how I remember enterprise external. And that'd be like the water department. And then our fiduciary funds are private purpose, investment, pension, and agency. And so we will kind of define those as we go along. And so the definitions of them are here. General fund is where most transactions go, and there's only one general fund. There's never more than one. So notice how I put S's on these, but not general fund, only one. Okay, so then special revenue fund, that's when the money used is for a specific purpose. And when you get that money, then you use it to maintain the park or whatever. Debt service fund, this is if we have like bonds and we're having to pay interest semi-annually and they're just servicing the debt. Capital projects fund is some kind of big project you're doing, like building a new park. And then a permanent fund, it says account for resources provided by trust where the earnings, but not the principal, are used for public purposes. So that would be the one that stays in perpetuity. And I think I used that as a proprietary one because proprietary ones can go into something like that as well. So, so here we're going to use the modified accrual basis of accounting. I'm guessing that's what this blank is. I'm going to make sure. Yep. So modified accrual basis of accounting is used. And then we're going to account for only current stuff, right? So I think that's mentioned up above though. So account for, oh, it says not expenses, expenditures. So expenditures instead of expenses. And so meaning that everything is current. Anytime we pay money, it's going to be an expenditure. We'll have a legally adopted budget, like we mentioned before as well. And so we'll have a balance sheet basically, and then a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And there's some examples of those in illustrations in your book. Make sure I got the blanks. You can always pause me, right? Okay, so proprietary funds are next. And so proprietary funds are the vowels. That's how I remember them. And so this one is to other departments of the same government for a charge. And so these are the internal service funds. I call them ISFs. Okay. And then these are the enterprise funds. Okay. And so internal service are only staying within the government. And so maybe fixing cars, maybe a printing service that's printing only within the city or whatever. And then enterprise funds are like water bills, airports, parking garages, that kind of stuff, public pools. So common characteristics, they are going to use regular accrual basis of accounting. And so, so they'll use full accrual basis accounting. So full accrual basis accounting. And so that means that they're not going to use the modified accrual. The modified accrual, it says revenue is when it's available. And so basically it's when you've earned it, but it's available to you, not just earned. So, and then in the modified accrual basis, everything is considered current. Whereas here we're going to have long-term assets. And so we will record depreciation. You don't record depreciation if everything is current. So in the governmental funds, there is no depreciation, which is weird. And they will use the word expenses, not expenditures. So in the proprietary funds, they don't use the expenditures word. And then they have the basically all four financials. So fiduciary funds are listed here. So private purpose. And so basically you're acting as a trustee for a private individual and you're using the money for that. This is, okay, now I remember. This is where the principal sits and then the interest is deposited into like either a special revenue fund or a permanent fund to use for a specific purpose. So investment trust funds, this is like where the investments for the 401k plans or pension plans of the business are, or so this is like investments that are earning interest and things like that. Pensions is where the actual employee benefits are. Agency funds is like an in and out. So it's when we collect money for taxes and then we have to turn that money over to another entity. We're going to do all of this in chapter 8. So in week 7. So as far as characteristics go, again, they're using full on accrual basis of accounting. They will have, they won't have depreciation because they're not really going to have fixed assets. And so it'll be interesting because basically it's just going to be a lot of money in, money out, and then earning investment interest. So as far as capital assets and long-term liabilities go, we will focus on those in future chapters. And so basically in the general fund and in the governmental funds, there will be no capital assets. There will be no depreciation, but in proprietary and fiduciary, there is. And so, and then as far as long-term liabilities, nothing is long-term in governmental funds. Everything is current. And then the long-term stuff happens in proprietary and fiduciary. Okay, so the next page is weird. We can acknowledge that it's weird, but this is the way I learned the funds. And so when I took the CPA exam back in 2007 is when I took it, governmental accounting was not my friend. I did not like fund accounting. It was not my thing, but I knew I needed to know it. And so you need to remember which funds are governmental, proprietary, and fiduciary. So Pippa Sea Gripes is the way we remember this. Pippa Sea Gripes is a really weird thing to say because it's not even really words, but for some reason it helped me remember it. And so Pippa Sea Gripes. Now, Pippa is your fiduciary funds, and then Sea Gripes is your proprietary and governmental. The vowels are your proprietary funds, your vowels, I and E, internal service and enterprise. Pippa is your fiduciary, pension, investment, private purpose, agency, Pippa, okay? So these are the fiduciary ones, okay? So one of the things, like your quizzes and exams and stuff are going to be open book, but that didn't happen for my students to take this class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 every other spring. And it won't happen on the CPA exams. On the CPA exam, it's not open book. So you have to remember. So Pippa is your fiduciary accounts. And so Pippa, so pension, investment, private purpose, agency, all right? And then Sea Gripes, we covered the vowels, and then C is capital projects, general, special revenue, permanent, and debt service. Okay, so I just remember it based on the letters, and then I know I have to come up with 4 of these, and then of the Sea Gripes, there's 5 governmental and 2 proprietary, and so on. And so, so Pippa Sea Gripes, there it is. So, okay, so for homework for chapter 2, I already kind of started that one for you. You're going to have some questions. So let's just preview the whole thing. And I'll just kind of run through it. So the first tab is, so it's not nearly as cluttered as chapter one's homework, right? And so I just want you to briefly describe the three broad categories of governmental, per business type, and fiduciary. And so go in your notes and find some information. You don't have to fill in all the rows, just kind of give me some summary. And then I want you to identify which ones are governmental, which ones are proprietary, and what kinds are fiduciary. And then this is the type of, so also identify what basis of accounting. So where I says type of fund, it should say basis of accounting. Maybe I'll go change that. I just saw that. So you're going to fill that in. So what I'm looking for right here is the basis of accounting. So which one is accrual basis versus modified accrual basis? Okay, that's a good hint. All right, next page. So the next page is for the Wichita CAFR. And I'm going to have you guys pull up the Wichita CAFR again and answer these questions. So I want you to go look at the general fund, and does the report state the basis of accounting used for the general fund? What types of assets are included in governmental funds balance sheet? Is this reporting consistent with the basis of accounting being followed? Or list the names of the governmental funds other than the general fund that are included as major. So you're just going to go through and you're going to answer those questions. And so there, it's number 16 in the book. And so if you want like more of an explanation than what I wrote as these bold questions, you can kind of look there for more. Okay. And then you're going to do 3 that are like matching. And so these shouldn't take too much. So like an agency fund as an example is a fiduciary fund. So you'll put FF. Okay. And then I said reminder, Pippa Sea grapes. All right. And then this is a matching one. So you'll go just look on page problem 218. And then last one is that one with the numbers. And so I don't think the chapter 2 homework is bad at all. So you're going to do 2 chapters this week because the homework is pretty short and we haven't learned any journal entries yet. And then we'll get into the good stuff. So I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you have a great first week, and I'll see you guys all soon. Bye-bye.